Demon Slayer is a manga and anime that has been very well received, and for good reason. The story is intense and exciting, and there are very loved characters with many details and beautiful backstories that many animes can really learn from. One character who breaks the mold in the story of demons with tragic backgrounds is Upper Moon 2 demon and cult leader Douma. Before I officially get into this, I need to say this video does contain a lot of spoilers, including major character deaths, stories, and others, but I'm sure if you click this video, you're prepared for that. While Douma at first glance seems to be a one-dimensional character who doesn't remotely qualify as someone needing an analysis, the more I have researched him, the more I have found that there is a lot more to talk about. While still stereotypical on the surface, there are many aspects of his character that make him interesting, as well as gives him some complexity. Douma is the demon fought by Shinobu, Kanao, and Inosuke. He is first shown in chapter 96 when Upper Moon 6 Gyutaro thinks back on when he and his sister were first turned into demons by Douma. He is then formally introduced in chapter 98 when Muzan has an emergency meeting with the Upper Moon demons. Douma shows excitement when Muzan seems to show his discontentment because Douma, like the dream demon Enmu, enjoys the idea of being injured. But it's not just by Muzan. He is attacked by Akaza and refers to this as a friendly greeting. Later in the story, he battles Shinobu, the insect pillar, who he allows to continuously poison him until he decides to absorb her into his body, killing her. He then battles her adopted sister, Kanao, and Inosuke, all the while never realizing that Shinobu was actually filled with wisteria, which is a powerful poison to demons. He begins quickly falling apart once the 82 pounds of poison begin circulating through his body, and although he could have recovered from it, it gave Kanao and Inosuke just enough time to manage to cut off his head, successfully killing him. This then gives my personal favorite scene in the story of Shinobu taunting him in the afterlife and perfectly ends a wonderful revenge story. Douma is the name of Russian origin, which translates to at home, which could simply refer to him as being at home with his leader status. It could also be a nod to his atheist beliefs, as he believes Earth is his home because neither heaven nor hell exist in his opinion. He also pretends to believe that eating people gives them a place to belong in him. More on that later. His Russian origins do not stop there, as his clothing is also very reminiscent of a Russian priest. He dons a Russian skufa, which is a pointed hat he wears, and the blood on top of his hair also looks like another style of hat priests may wear. And he also wears a cape that includes drapes as well. His dark splotches on his clothing also look very much like blood. The colors in Douma's design are also important as they fit with how contradictory his character can be. His clothing is made up of purple, red, black, and green, with a noticeable absence of white. These colors normally make up the colors that priests may wear. His purple drape is normally worn on the 6th Sunday before Christmas for Advent, which can be a nod to his ice powers. It can also be worn during Lent, which occurs during the 40 days before Easter, and ironically is when people replicate Jesus when he is tempted by the devil to break his 40-day fasting. Red symbolizes the color of Jesus or a martyr, which shows his lust for blood as a demon, but also his fake facade of being a martyr who saves his cult followers by eating them. Black can represent a death, but is normally not worn much by the average priest. His green belt represents the time in church, such as when it takes place. White, which is missing from his design, celebrates the saint who are not martyrs and things worth celebrating. The fact that it is missing, for one thing, shows that all of his people are martyrs to him, and also shows his lack of excitement. This lack of excitement is because of Douma's inability to feel emotions, as well as his possible insensitivity to pain. This can cause eye damage, which is a focus with Douma, as people with this condition tend to be less protective of themselves, and they don't feel their eyes stinging. Douma noticeably doesn't stop the relentless attacks on his eyes by Shinobu, only looking moderately surprised they occur. People like this also lack depression, anxiety, and fear as a side effect sometimes, which fits with Douma's problems with being able to not feel and with understanding other people's pain. It can also cause a lack of excitement and memory impairment. While Douma is able to remember his life as a human, unlike every demon aside from Muzan, he has short-term memory loss, as shown when he has to give himself a lobotomy to remember something that happened 15 years ago when he met Inosuke's mother, a former cult member of his. Other conditions Douma suffers from, which are obviously noticeable upon reading the manga, are his narcissism and psychopathy. Narcissism can stem from too much praise in their childhood, and as a child cult leader who is worshipped since the day he was born, that is certainly a recipe for narcissism at a young age. It is also interesting to point out how Douma is hated by many upper moons and moves on because they can't stand his personality, but he assumes them all to be friends despite that. In The Hidden Suffering of a Psychopath, Martins discusses how psychopaths often have a chaotic family life and can be self-destructive, as you can see when Douma willingly allows Shinobu to continuously poison him. It is also likely inherited, and this is backed up by his family, who started the Eternal Paradise cult, but his father used him as an excuse to sleep with cult members, and was ultimately killed by Douma's mother, who then poisoned herself. He does exhibit a desire to be loved by others, which fits with his cult status, as he enjoys being worshipped. Many psychopaths do desire being loved, but often do not find that due to their difficulty of showing love themselves. They also can feel dejected and isolated even when they are not. In the afterlife scene with Shinobu, he believes he has learned what love is when she speaks to him and attempts to express it, even though it comes off as strange considering how he treated her in their battle, and he even pretended to not know her name when she taunted him at first. He likely for the first time came to terms that someone had bested him and likely formed an obsession with the woman who was able to do it. In the next parts, I would like to discuss his powers and why they are important to his character. I will be focusing on what they represent rather than what they do. Anime Uproar does a video which discusses every Blood Demon art if you're interested in what his powers do, and I will link it in the description below. His first ability is Wilted Hanging Gardens, which I found mentioned in Stephanie Dalley's book, The Mystery of the Hanging Garden of Babylon, where they discuss specifically how wilted hanging gardens are seen with a theater that represents Dionysus, the festival god, and how the people encapsulated the theater like a cocoon, which makes me think of Shinobu due to her insect aesthetic. This is also ironic because it involves Babylon, which is mentioned often in the Bible, and gardens of course are associated with life and fertility. His wilted gardens are actually pure ice, winter being a rough season for most plants. This will be a reoccurring theme in his powers. Number 2 is Freezing Fog, which consists of ice crystals that occur at under 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. His third and fourth demon arts are Lotus Ice and Scattered Lotuses. Lotuses represent feminine beauty, fertility, and are symbolic in Buddhism. They can also represent creation and rebirth, while spending time with Douma leads to destruction and death. It can also be noted that some lotuses actually sink at night into water, then rise at dawn, which further emphasizes the contradiction of the power in Douma himself. His fifth power is called Arctic White Princesses. Arctic White is a type of quartz that is perfect to work with as a blank canvas, which can be a nod to how Douma views women and sees them as easy to manipulate. Princesses also represent royalty, purity, and beauty. Next is number 6, Wintry Icicles. Icicles and dreams can be associated with sexuality and just winter as a whole, but I believe the sexuality ties in with the fertility subjects of his power. Lotus Vines, his seventh power, can symbolize, ironically, summer, as the plant is actually associated with summer as it is colored like fire. Number 8 is Crystal Prince, where Douma copies himself, showing his narcissism and believing he is above people. While I am not sure if this is a coincidence or not, I came across a story called Mud People and the Crystal Prince, which is interesting as a lotus is often believed to represent purity and fertility because it is grown from mud. I believe this can tie into Douma's fake superiority complex that he believes it gives him the right to look down on people. Douma's ninth and final power is Hoarfrost, Waterlily, Bodhisattva. A Bodhisattva is someone who is thought to be able to reach nirvana, but delays it to tend to other suffering beings, which ties into Douma's faked idea that he is a martyr who is saving people by ending their suffering through eating them. Water lilies are also often associated with peace, which is what he tells his followers of Eternal Paradise cult he will give them. I think his powers contradicting can show his desire for love and adoration, which conflict with him shutting people down by looking down on them and forcing them to feel inferior. He comes off as not authentic, which I think his battle with Kanao brings out his true nature. He becomes annoyed with her when she insults him for lacking emotion and having no ability to feel, which is a soft spot for Douma. As the only demon besides Muzan who remembered his life as a human well, he reveals he was always lacked empathy. When his parents die, all he could think about was the fact that his mother made the room messy and how awful the smell of blood was. He was not upset they had died at all. When Akaza is killed, Douma pretends to cry over him, but Kanao, as someone who also struggled with showing her emotions, sees through it. Douma also calls Akaza his friend, even though Akaza hated his guts, and even refers to Akaza as attacking him earlier as a friendly greeting. Douma's battle with Shinobu is one of my favorites, if not my favorite battle in the series. The mirror side of Douma causes Shinobu for the first time to really express her pent-up rage, because this demon happens to be the one who murdered Shinobu's older sister, Kane. Their battle initiates, and both being sadists, Douma more of a sadomasochist. I think they paired well as enemies, and I enjoy the parallels and contrasting parts to their characters. Shinobu and Douma offer false salvation to demons and humans respectively, Shinobu pretending to be friends with demons if they will repent for their sins, in which she believes the only way to do that is by them dying. Douma offers false salvation to abused and scared women that joining his cult will end their suffering, also only allowing it to occur through death. It is also interesting to note that Douma is practically a god in the eyes of his followers, while Shinobu is called a goddess by the survivors she is able to heal. Douma also attacks Shinobu, not only physically, but also by targeting her inferiority complex. His own inferiority complex that he hides deep down is then attacked by her adopted sister Kanao, and then by Shinobu herself in her afterlife dialogue with Douma. Both Douma and Shinobu also have powers that can both be associated with delicacy, yet deadliness. Shinobu's being insects, which can sometimes injure themselves when attacking, but also leave a powerful sting and sometimes poison, while Douma's ice can be seen as fragile, yet winter can be very deadly itself. To finish up on his battle with Shinobu, a folklore story, which I actually learned about from Not the Bad Guys analysis about Shinobu, is Douma's battle plays off of the story of Omokade, the Japanese centipede yokai that is often represented by immortality, but was slain by having its eye pierced, which weakened it enough for it to be hacked apart. Douma is filled with poison repeatedly by Shinobu, often being hit in his eye, and is ultimately overwhelmed by poison that Shinobu is filled with when he consumes her, and his head is eventually cut off by Kanao and Inosuke in his weakened state. It is ironic that his mother notably murdered his father, then killed herself with poison, then he himself is poisoned by Shinobu when his end comes. During Douma's fight with Kanao and Inosuke, he taunts Kanao for having skill, but still being slow compared to him, while he saw Shinobu as being almost too fast for him, but lacking skill to kill demons. He also taunts Inosuke by telling him about the time his mother had joined the Eternal Paradise cult. Despite pretending to believe eating women would bring them salvation, Douma intended to let Inosuke's mother live out her days with him because she was pretty and had a nice singing voice. While he believed her to be stupid, she quickly realized Douma was eating his followers and attempted to escape with an infant Inosuke so she could protect him. Unable to find a village, she reached a dead-end cliff where she ended up rolling Inosuke off, believing hopefully he will be found by people who would take care of him, and she is then killed there by Douma. Douma assumes the baby is dead from the fall and does not go after him. This, as well as his murdering of Kane, marked his death in a way. Shinobu filled herself with poison specifically to kill the demon who murdered her sister, and Inosuke did not know about his mother, but Douma taunting him about it strengthened Inosuke's already strong desire to see his death through to the end. Now, before we conclude this video, I'd like to discuss a few more things. One, I think it is interesting how much Akaza hates Douma. It makes sense because Douma from birth is seemingly given everything from praise to adoration and superiority, while Akaza had a sick father who committed suicide after Akaza began stealing medicine to keep his father alive because they couldn't afford it. When Akaza loses his family, it devastates him. Douma lacks the ability to feel upset about his family. It's also interesting to note that Akaza refuses to kill women, while Douma exclusively kills women. One thing Akaza did have that Douma lacked his entire life was love and to be loved. I would also like to mention Douma's eyes, as they are obviously very important, as they are special rainbow-colored eyes. Rainbows often represent beauty and reflection. In To the Lighthouse, Virginia Woolf says it is as ephemeral as a rainbow, which means it's the transience of men and mortality. I bring up his eyes at the end because I want to discuss what I mentioned earlier. While Douma seems one-dimensional at first glance, I wanted to convey that there is more you can take from him as a character. Rainbows are an optical effect that can be seen at different locations depending on where a person is standing and what perspective they see it from, and I believe Douma's character stands similar to this. Some people see him as a stereotypical psychopath. Some people believe surely there is more to him. I personally am in between. I find his character enjoyable to analyze. There are few characters who manage to make me go back and forth about whether I love them or hate them. I have read Demon Slayer 3 times, and every time I still find myself back and forth on my feelings for Douma. I can definitely say that he was certainly enjoyable, and if you guys have any opinions on his character or other things you want to add that you found about him, let me know in the comments. I had a lot of fun talking about him and hope to hear anybody who has more to say. Please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.